TF2 Soldier tier list. This is for Valve 12v12 casual. And also considerations for the tier list. We're assuming random crits, kind of like random enemy teams, random player teams. We can't really assume you have a medic or a pocket medic or, engineers putting up dispensers, things like this. So this is just like you as the player with random unknown teammates and enemies with random skill levels and so on. So let's start with stock rocket launcher. Definitely S tier. Now you could argue stock can carry teams. Obviously, if you're a really good soldier, you can carry teams with just stock. This is more in relation to the performance of the item or the weapon in question. So like stock can easily hit S+ if you're like a really good soldier. You can easily carry teams with it. But for the average soldier or the above average soldier, it's just going to be really good. It's really good at taking down sentry nests because it is a rocket launcher. It's good at fighting enemies in general, bombing medics, doing all the things that soldier needs to do, and for just dealing damage. If you want to kill things, stock rocket launcher is a good option. Direct hit, I'm putting an A tier. Losing splash is a pretty big deal. It basically makes you better at 1v1s if you can land the direct hits, and it also is really good at taking down sentries if you have line of sight on them. The lack of splash damage makes it a little bit worse at taking down specific nest locations, whereas with stock, you can spam the nest out with splash, and with good rocket placement, stock, original, black box, and so on can hit the engineer, sentry, and dispenser simultaneously, preventing the engineer from just infinite tanking his sentry. So stock is definitely better at taking down competent engineer nests, whereas with the direct hit, you can catch an engineer off guard because two rockets that are faster firing can rapidly snipe sentries. It also one-shots minis, which is nice. So situationally, I would say it could move into S and maybe even S+ if you're like a god with it. But for your average soldier, and I'm assuming an average soldier is like 300 to 500 hours or more of playtime on soldier, so I'm assuming they're like pretty good. It's probably about A tier. Original, it's a side grade to stock, depends on preference. It's not really better or worse. One of the things with stock is rockets come out from the right from stock. So with the original, they come out directly from the center, which is good and bad. It's good because it makes rocket jumping super consistent if you're not used to like the slight angle difference of where the rocket comes out of. And there are also different positions where you can shoot the original, where you can't shoot the stock, and vice versa. One interesting thing about stock is you can have your face in a wall, and as long as your rocket can clear to the right, like if there's empty space to the right, you can be hiding behind props, walls, corners, certain things like this, like rocks and stuff like that, and shoot rockets at sentries that you can't really see, but if you know they're there, it'll spawn the rocket to the right, and the rocket will fly like essentially through cover. In the reality, it's spawning around it, and the sentry can't hit you, but you can hit it, and you cannot do this with the original. But they're basically side grades. They're basically the same thing. Airstrike, I think, is just B tier. With optimal play, I would say it could move up to like maybe A. But the issue with it is if the enemy team is as good as you are, we can't assume you are farming them, because if their deathmatching skills are about on par with yours, this is just a worse rocket launcher that sucks. When you get a bunch of kills and you get a bunch of ammo and you start spamming as you rocket jump these like huge barrages of rockets, then it becomes good. But until then, like starting off, it is just worse than stock for sure. So like if you encounter another good soldier, a scout, a demo man, some kind of actual threat in a 1v1, or even in like some kind of team fight, they're going to outdamage you, and you're going to notice it. Now, if you only play, like let's say you like hang out with your teammates and clean up damage to rack up kills, you could play a kind of supportive role so that you're not taking on 1v1s. But when you want to push flanks and bomb in and stuff like this, when you don't have the clip, like the kills to get the extra shots, it's just worse than stock for sure. That doesn't mean you can't win games with it or do well with it, but it is just noticeably harder to do well, even if you're good with it, because these just have more damage at base and can just start doing things right out of the gate, whereas this, you have to get kills, and then anytime you die, it resets your streak, and when it resets your streak, you're back down to square one. So it really depends on how good the enemy team is and how good their players are, because if you're getting like 1 to 2 kills per death, which is usually around what happens when teams are pretty even, assuming that, like, if someone's at your skill level, 1v1ing you, it's kind of like a coin flip as to who wins because they're at your skill level. So, like, you can't really assume you're going to be farming the enemy team unless they're much worse than you, and in which case stock would also do that. So I guess that's my argument against airstrike. But it can be okay, but I do think it's a little bit worse. Beggars, I think, is high A and can easily move up to S and potentially S+, but this requires a tremendous amount of skill. There's a specific player that I'm aware of whose Beggars is named Iron Butterfly that has like 100k plus kills. That's like a god with this thing. So like it can easily move into S+. Well, not easily. 100k kills takes a long time to achieve. But essentially, this thing never needs ammo because it just keeps reload shooting around the fire rate of the normal loaded rockets. So even though you have 0 ammo, you can still continue a consistent like barrage. You can also rocket jump off of the air, do interesting combo jumps with gunboats to just like super rocket jump across maps, bouncing off of nothing because it can blow up in the air. You can also unload like a 300 damage barrage around a corner, killing several enemies instantly before they have time to react to it. The other thing too is this rocket launcher can kind of mess up good pyros because they can't reflect all of the rockets. I think that at most they can reflect 2, but very likely they'll reflect 1 and 2 will hit. Or if you get the drop on them and they don't see you coming, which can be the case because you can do a super rocket jump and then bomb in and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure that the most they can reflect 2, maybe they can only reflect 1 due to the hitbox size of the reflect. But it does seem to be able to mess up good pyros. And also the variation for shooting at range, like the 3-degree angle variation per shot does kind of hurt it. But it can still take out nests at relatively long ranges. It just doesn't have as much precision. But you can also shoot 3 rockets at a nest, which does a ton of damage and can overwhelm an engineer or a group of engineers. So there's pros and cons, but it can easily move into S or S+, depending on player skill. Cow Mangler, I don't think there's really a point to it. I think it's just B tier. The issue is the charge shot disabling sentries is fine, but destroying sentries and pressuring engineers is better. So like if I can just have good rocket placement and just hit the entire nest or just hit the engineer plus the sentry, I can either kill the engineer and then the sentry or pressure the engineer and force him to run away or try to like find his dispenser. Now, if his dispenser is within range, I can actually deal meaningful damage to the sentry, engineer, and dispenser and any teammates on the enemy team that are near that dispenser. Whereas with the Cow Mangler, you will just damage the players and your building damage is so terrible that you might as well not even bother shooting buildings with this. Now, the reason why I don't think this is good in 12v12 Valve casual is because there are usually 2 to 3, sometimes more sentry nests, and disabling a single sentry versus destroying an entire nest, it's just not even close. Now, if there's a god engineer that's like wrangling, this can be situationally useful, but situationally useful is not like the average, so I don't really think it's there. Black Box, I do think, is worse than stock, but still S tier. Reliable healing is not a guarantee in casual servers. You have 11 teammates that are usually grabbing health kits, and very often the 50 and 100% health kits will be taken, or you'll be competing with teammates for those. So like healing can be inconsistent and unreliable. You can have medics on your team that refuse to heal people aside from a heavy or like a demo or their friend. Like maybe they're pocketing a friend that's like a soldier or something. That's common. Sometimes you get good meds that heal you, and then you can run stock and it's great. But I usually have to run this just so that I can sustain and survive. There's a lot of spam coming through choke points, which means you're eating a lot of spam. So if you're just constantly taking like 20 to 30 damage of like explosive spam over like a 30-second period, you eventually will just die from chip damage. And if there's not engineers on your team placing dispensers, if there's not medics healing you, this is just a really good option for when teams are relatively even and you just need some sustain. Is it better than stock? No, it's objectively worse than stock when you're getting healed. But if you're not getting healed, it's really good. And in my experience, I infrequently get healed even when there's a medic. They're usually a newer player who doesn't really know what they're doing, which is fine. You know, a lot of newer players play med, and that's great. But usually I find that I need to run this just so that I don't die from spam. And it's not like you have to push through choke points on most of these maps. It's not like you can avoid it. there's like 3 entrances into where you need to go to win, and enemies are at all those entrances. So it's not like you can just rocket jump. You can rocket jump through chokes, but very often there's a sentry behind that. So like if you rocket jump in, you'll just get killed by a sentry. So it really depends on like what's going on, how well flank routes are like being watched. Now you can always use gunboats and stock and get through. That's an alternative. But I prefer the slow push when teams are even. It depends on how good the enemy is, I suppose, but I think this is still like S tier for 12v12. Rocket jumper is just for fun. Like this is in a way, this is throwing. This is not, if you're just trying to have fun and troll people with the market gardener, this is, I'll add that. So it's like, it's not really useful. Like you're throwing out your ability to deathmatch, to win team fights, to destroy sentry nests, to troll people with the market gardener. So Liberty Launcher, I also think is C tier. The lower damage is very difficult to play around, I find. Your slow fire rate compared to other weapons, like if you're 1v1ing a demo, 2 pills kills you unless you're overhealed. So like not being able to kill him in 2 rockets sucks. It does give you better 1v1s against like scouts and stuff, but you also have shotguns that can do that if you're having a hard time against like a really good scout. And you can also use your teammate, you can use positioning, you can use sentries to kind of like ward off a scout. That's really good. But generally losing all this damage for an extra rocket, I don't think is worth it. If enemies are overhealed, it really sucks, especially because then it takes like 4 rockets to kill like most things, and that's just not that good. Maybe it can move up to B tier with skill, but its potential is really limited by its damage output. All right, so here is the first S plus tier, possibly the only S plus tier. I think the Battalion's backup just straight up carries games. You get 20 extra health, which is nice. But the big important thing is you can rapidly charge this thing just from spamming. Like if teams are relatively even, or if you're like slightly winning or slightly losing, like if you're not getting stomped. If you're getting stomped, most things won't work. You're probably better off just running burst damage to try to get like 1 to 3 kills before you die. But if teams are relatively even if you're like losing and struggling to push through, this lets your entire team push through. I've won so many games just by running this particular item. Crit immunity can counter enemy crits Kriegs, which is really stupid and also awesome because I hate getting killed by crits, so getting killed by crits Krieg never feels good. But this also lets your team push through sniper sight lines. It makes your team take half damage versus sentries, so you can easily push sentry nests. Like this is like an Uber for your team. It's completely insane. If you have even a single medic on your team that's overhealing people, you can usually push off of this, easily win a team fight, easily take down a bunch of nests. It lets you make progress. So like on a lot of maps, like payload maps, where there's a lot of choke points that are difficult to push through, this can nullify crits, nullify snipers, reduce incoming damage by nullifying random crits and crits in general, or any mechanics that have crits, and it makes your team 33% tankier. They take 33% less damage from all sources and are crit immune. You also have increased health. So if you combine this with the black box, you can sustain yourself, and then you can essentially Uber your team. So I think this item alone, like it doesn't even matter what you run it with. You can run with stock too, you can run with direct hit, it doesn't really matter, beggars, whatever your favorite rocket launcher is. It's just that good of an item. You just win team fights, it just lets you push through. Even on defense, like if the enemy does like an Uber, you can pop this and then start whipping your teammates to get them out of there and tank, and it's actually kind of insane. Honestly, I think disciplinary action, I'm just going to throw it in S plus as well. I think this wins games too. So, all right, so here's what it does. You get a speed boost for 3 seconds. The whipped ally gets a speed boost for 2 seconds. And it does make you quite fast. So anytime anyone gets Ubered on your team, like if you're not getting the Uber and you know it's a good player or it's like a heavy, just keep whipping them. Like whip them, switch, shoot a rocket or 2, whip them, switch, shoot a rocket or 2. I've won a ton of games just by doing this. It's so brain dead and it's so easy to do. I've also won games by Battalion backupping a heavy med combo that isn't even Ubered and then whipping the heavy. Because like think about it, the heavy has 450 health overhealed. He's crit immune. He has a 33% damage reduction from all sources. He essentially has like almost 600 health. And then also you're shooting rockets, he's mowing people down. You're speed boosting him with a whip. It's kind of insane and really obnoxious, but it really wins games. Like I won a few games yesterday just by doing just this. And it's really stupid. You don't even have to be good at the game to do this. Just shoot spam with any of these, build up this, whip teammates, counter crits, get through choke points. Like a single crit sticky will wipe out like an entire push, even if it's a random crit sticky, a single crit pill, a single crit rocket. All these things do huge damage that just completely wipe pushes and set your team back. So this just removes the randomness. So I think these carry teams. Buff banner I think is S tier. Getting mini crits on your team is also really good. It doesn't help you with sentry nests outside of killing the engineer. So in a way it does, but if you use this in combination with a stock Uber, this requires there to be a stock Uber and coordination though, which we can't assume. If that's the case, S+. But obviously for your average situation, if you're just mostly getting random mini crit rockets, which are huge damage, this allows you to one-shot snipers from across the map, which they love. They love getting splashed for full HP. And you know what? They kind of deserve it. They get to taste, the taste of their own medicine, especially if you direct hit a sniper with mini crits. It's very funny. But mini crits on your team, especially with like a quick fix Uber or a stock Uber plus whipping, is actually pretty cracked. If you mini crits a heavy, that's pretty cracked as well. So easily S tier, but depending on the situation, it can move into S+. The reason I have Battalion's backup in here is because this always can get you through choke points, whereas with this, your team can still die quickly. It's the same problem with Kritzkrieg, right? Like with stock Uber, you're invincible for 8 seconds. With Kritzkrieg, you just have crits. So if you get Kritzkrieged and the entire enemy team just goes 100% aggression and just kills you really quickly, that can happen, and that can stuff the crits. Or if someone just happens to like headshot the med, or dive bomb the med like mid crits, that I've like when I play scout and there's like a demo med crits combo, I'll like hide like and kind of anticipate it, and then I'll just run right into the demo's face. Like I'll approach him from like above and behind and be double jumping over him and go for like 3 meat shots and usually get him. And I'll also like dive bomb him and stuff too on soldier if I can. So like you can counter crits with just aggression if you time it right, but obviously if the demo is really good, is aware of where you're at and stuff like that. So this is like a higher risk, potentially higher reward play where your entire team can mow down the entire enemy team rapidly. So it is really good for sure, but I do think this carries more games. The Conqueror I feel like is just A tier. The self-heal is decent. The speed boost is really nice. And the healing to your team is really nice as well. But in terms of like raw carry potential, this is really good on dynamic game modes like 5 CP and King of the Hill, but on like payload, like moving fast when there's sentries on both sides of choke points and there's like huge volumes of players on both sides of choke points can help to some degree. But like if you have to quickly move through a choke point, it could be trapped, there could be a heavy there revved, which can mow you down rapidly, there could be sentries. So like pushing through is usually best done off of crits or tanking. The speed thing, it's debatable, like how good it is. Like it doesn't really make you tankier. If the allies are dealing damage, it lets them heal. But I find that of the 3 banners, this wins me the most games, and this is really strong with coordination, definitely like S+. But this I feel like is only really good if the other banners are present, because then what happens, like this is like S+ with banner bros, but in normal play I would just say it's like A, maybe S tier. With banner bros, if you have a dude on each banner and you also have a Conqueror, then it becomes S+, because then you're dealing mini crits, you're crit immune, you're tankier, you're moving faster, and you're healing. Like 3 banner, if you have one of each banner and you coordinate it, it's like stronger than having Ubers, because your entire team is just insane. Like if you just have a huge mass of players that just mini crit everything, take no crits, tank, move faster, and heal, and it's almost like they're all getting a kind of Uber effect, assuming this requires a high level of coordination. So like I can't assume that for a 12v12 Valve server where you're lucky if you get a med healing you consistently. So this I would just say is like A, maybe S tier. The parachute, the base jumper, I think it's like B tier. I think there's situations where it's decent. There's definitely better secondaries. On soldier, I feel like it's probably best paired with like airstrike and beggars. Because beggars you can slow fall like in choke points if there's just enough skybox or like height, like if the ceiling's high enough to slow fall, so that as enemies are running through a choke, you unload 3 rockets on them with like minimal damage fall off, like assuming you're like almost right on top of them. So you could do like 300 burst damage to a huge volume of enemies, and this could be a good combo, but they'll probably figure that out. Like if you keep doing a thing in TF2, like if a spy keeps doing trick stabs or a sniper is on like in a specific location, players will adapt to what you're doing. So like if you keep doing this, they might be like, oh, the soldier's gonna bomb us from above. Let's have a pyro compression blast before we even move in. Like things like this can happen, but it does have some combo potential with these two weapons. Obviously with the airstrike for the airstrike combo when you get fed. But if you run the airstrike with the base jumper, your 1v1 potential is terrible. So you better hope you don't encounter like a good combo, a good scout, a good soldier. And also consider that when you're base jumping, if there's good snipers in the enemy team and you're just floating around high up, you're probably getting headshot. So another big downside of it. Stock shotgun. I think shotgun's low S. I think it's fair to say. It's just reliable. It's good. Good dueling. Good for being, you know, a combo soldier. If you're getting Ubered, just generally good. Like if you want a deathmatch, one of the big things you can do, like especially if you're fighting like a scout or something that's good, is hit him with a rocket splash and then switch to shotgun to get a quick 1-2. Switching to shotgun and firing is faster than shooting a second rocket. The rocket interval is 0.8 seconds to fire. The first shot is instant, so you fire a rocket, it takes 0.5 seconds to switch to your shotgun. So in 0.5 seconds, you've shot a rocket and then shot a shotgun blast. And then you can switch back to your rocket to then fire a second rocket. So then instead of firing 2 rockets in 0.8 seconds, you have fired 2 rockets and a shotgun blast in 1 second. So that's, and you have to switch immediately. So like the only time, like the switch to and from time is 0.5 to the shotgun and then 0.5 to back to the rocket launcher. So you can do basic combos like that to deal like huge burst and win 1v1s. On that topic, the reserve shooter also can do that, but it does it a little bit faster because it has 20% faster switch to, and it mini crits rocket jumping or enemies that have been bounced with an explosive. So if enemies are explosive jumping, which includes Scorch Shot, I'm pretty sure it includes Scorch Shot and Detonator. I could be wrong on that. And I'm also pretty sure it includes the Thermal Thruster. But if I'm wrong on that, definitely let me know. And I'm pretty sure it does that. But sticky jumping demos, grenade jumping demos, rocket jumping soldiers, or enemies that you bounce up with a rocket launcher. Now, the idea behind the reserve shooter was that the Liberty launcher has faster rockets and lower damage so that you bounce and then you mini crit. But the reality is the lower initial damage does hurt you a lot in dueling and when fighting like incoming airborne enemies, like enemy soldiers bombing your team. If I'm getting an air shot, I want to be dealing as much damage as humanly possible. Obviously, direct hit does that, but stock is really good at dealing with enemy soldiers in the air. So like if I can hit air shot for like 80 to 100, I would prefer that. So if I want to do a combo, I would bounce with like original or stock and then do the reserve shooter mini crit, which can be really good because just like before with the shotgun rocket combo, the rocket reserve shooter combo does the same thing, but it switches to faster. So I think it switches to in 0.4. So instead of it taking 1 second, it takes 0.9. And these fractions of seconds do matter in 1v1s, even though it sounds like 0.1 seconds isn't that big of a deal. It really is because like with how tight the attack intervals are in this game, that could be the difference between winning or losing a fight. But also you get mini crits if you bounce them up, so then you get even more damage. And also if you bounce them away, mini crits reduce fall off by giving you minimum damage per pellet, which is huge. And also you can chip shot anything that's rocket jumping or explosive jumping in the air for minimum fall off. And for every pellet that hits, you'll deal a minimum amount of damage that's actually quite high, even at very far ranges. So if there's enemies bombing or flying across the map, you can just start peppering them and like pushing them around a little bit with the mini crit force on hit. The panic attack. I think this is a little bit better than the reserve shooter for combos and a little bit worse than stock for consistency, but I do think it is S tier. The panic attack is really good with like the black box because then essentially what happens is you get a little bit more durability from the healing, and because you have insanely quick switch to, it takes 0.25 seconds to switch to this, you can fire a rocket, shotgun, faster or at the speed, the fire rate of shooting a rocket. So if the attack interval on a rocket launcher is 0.8 seconds, it takes you 0.25 to switch to and 0.5 to switch from. That's only 0.75 seconds. So you actually get free damage essentially. So in close range encounters, this also, it has higher base damage. So if you're like going to be bombing in or pushing through chokes and you want burst damage, this plus any like stock is really good, or even the direct hit. If you want maximum damage, like let's say you want to like aggressively attack a heavy, the direct hit plus the panic attack, this can hit like 140 at point blank, and then this does like 110. So 140, 110, 140 in like the fire rate of 2 rockets, because like the switch to kind of negates the fire rate, which is pretty cool. So you can do like this quick combo that does like 300 damage in less than a second. And if you catch a heavy off guard, especially if they're not revved, that's a dead heavy. And even if they're overhealed, you can just switch back to the panic attack and put like 400 damage on him at point blank, which is actually insane. So that alone can kill a heavy really rapidly. And it also gives you huge dueling potential. But this with any shotgun on close quarters maps, or if you plan on being close to enemies, gives you a lot of burst damage. For every successive shot though, like if you keep shooting, the pattern gets worse. So it actually benefits from quick switching, because every time you switch back, it resets the panic attack's accuracy. So you can do like these quick combos that deal huge burst. The Bison is just a fun weapon, the Bison. I like to run this from sometime. If I see enemy soldiers running this, I'll probably switch to it and have like duels with them and just be an idiot because it's just fun. But it's definitely just a fun weapon. It's not good at all. Gunboats, definitely S tier. Easily can hit S plus if you're really good at rocket jumping. I'm just kind of average at rocket jumping, so for me it'd just be like A or S tier. But if you're like a really good like combo rocket jump soldier, you know all the routes, all these different ways of getting around the map, easily S plus. You can carry teams because you can attack the enemy from weird angles and essentially be unkillable on certain maps, where if the enemy team goes to push you, you just combo rocket jump to safety, or keep going further and further into their backlines, to the point where they're like devoting several teammates, like several enemy units are chasing you and being useless, while your team basically just gets to fight a lopsided fight. And also you can use this to like get to spawn safely and start like spawn camping enemies to some degree, just harassing them, being annoying, being hard to kill. I've seen good rocket jump or good gunboat soldiers easily carry games for sure. Now any of these can be carried, like can hit S plus for carries teams, but mostly I want to reserve this for items that even if you're not even that good, just by virtue of using them, you will drastically improve your winning chances. Whereas if you were running something else, it will not do that. The man treads, I feel like this is just for fun. Maybe there's circumstances where it's decent, but it doesn't really seem to do much to justify running over gunboats. The force reduction is kind of neat. It mostly uses for Trollger to Goomba stuff. It's like a fun weapon. The equalizer, I'll put this in high C tier for situational. You get big damage when you're low HP, but you don't move faster anymore. So like it used to be the escape plan and the equalizer were one weapon, and it was super overpowered. So they moved the damage to one weapon, and then they moved the move faster to like just like kept that on the escape plan. But the damage only, soldier moves really slow, and there's better options for going for burst damage. So it's like hard to say that this isn't just for fun, because like you don't move fast enough to get in melees. Enemies easily can kite your melee distance. You're 80% move speed. You could do like some kind of rocket jump combo to get to people, but then you're basically just using a bad market gardener that doesn't guarantee a crit. So it's like it's just for fun. It's not really good. Is it better than Liberty Launcher? Maybe not. Maybe not. All right, escape plan I would say is low S. Possibly high S. Well, it doesn't carry your team. Let's think about like what we even mean by this. Like carries teams. So like carries teams, like whipping a heavy and whipping Ubered allies and stuff like this, that wins games. Whipping you and yourself and an ally who are about to die to health packs to cover. Whipping before rocket jumping in. Whipping before pushing into like through a choke. This universally always helps you. Whereas with this, I feel like this is like a competitive item. I'm actually going to put it in like A tier, because this doesn't win you games in a competitive setting. So, all right. So I guess in terms of like 1v1 potential, getting out, repositioning aggressively if you're low HP to grab health or just to escape or reposition. This does have huge value, but for actually winning games, I guess if you combine it with like gunboats, like if you go like gunboats, a lot of gunboat soldiers run Market Garden though, but if you combine this with gunboats, it does give you like extra escape potential, which can be huge value, but it is map dependent. So like on smaller maps, there's not really escape potential because there's nowhere to go. But on large maps, obviously that is a thing. And you have to consider that there's 12 enemies. So like there's people kind of everywhere. And when you whip this out, you take mini crits. So like if anyone just chips you, because when you're moving fast, you're like 50 HP, also known as anything will kill you. So like you can't really be too low. But this won't like carry you. This won't like you can't accelerate a heavy that's uber. Like even a bad heavy that can like vaguely aim at the enemy team being whipped while ubered can win a team fight, especially a good heavy. A good heavy being whipped easily wins encounters, pushes through chokes. This has like no team play aspect to it at all. It helps you, but if you're like flanking, if you're holding aggressive angles, if you're winning 1v1s, even if you're running like a shotgun with it, just as like a kind of get out of jail free card for when you're low HP. Sometimes you pull this out and then just get hit by like spam and die anyways. So it's not like, I think the whip is better because like you can use the whip to escape. You can use the whip to escape. You can use the whip to attack. It has increased melee range. It crits for 146, which still one taps 125s that aren't overhealed. So like very often when I pull the whip out and there's like an enemy scout like 1v1ing me, the extra melee range does throw people off and they don't account for it because they don't expect it from Soldier. On Demo Night they do, but on Soldier it usually catches people off guard and you just like whip them for 146. And the other thing too is I can whip an ally, get a speed boost, and then if I get a random crit, I also have increased melee range now. So like this thing is actually pretty cracked for like melee fights, for getting in and out. As long as you're playing near your team, it's basically a no risk escape plan that can work as long as there's an ally to whip. So I do think this is superior to this for sure. Now, if you're playing a flank soldier and you're not near allies, then this is objectively better than disciplinary because you're not able to leverage it. But if you're trying to win games, usually playing off of your team to some degree, like if you're so much better than the entire enemy team that you can play flank soldier, the enemies can't mess with you, and you're farming, you probably can run anything to win, so I guess it doesn't really matter, but we're kind of assuming like average soldier to above average soldier, maybe even below. These things will help you with basic use, whereas this is like super high skill ceiling, competitive MGE player that could still leverage it, but it's map dependent for sure. Half Zatoichi. This one's weird. I feel like it is situational. If there's an enemy Demo Night running this, this can be good, because then you can just one tap. You get one tapped as well, and Demo moves faster than you, so you have to kind of be careful. But situational for the heal even. Like let's say you bomb in, get a kill, and you're close enough to get a melee, you could get a quick heal off of this to sustain yourself after making a risky aggressive play. So definitely situational. I don't think it's better than escaping or always being relevant to your team. Market Gardener, I'll put this in mid S tier. Obviously you have to train with this and get good with it, but when you do, it essentially just gives you access to 195 damage crits at all times, assuming that you can land the Market Gardens. In the presence of good heavies and sentry spam, it's definitely not as good because sentries can stall you in the air and redirect you. Heavies will just air stall you and just delete you before you can land. So if you're fighting against good heavies and they're paying attention, I would not run this. But if you can kind of get away with it, if you push angles, if you push flanks, if you catch people off guard, this is huge value and is definitely S tier. Like even if you're not even that good with it, just the fact that anytime you rocket jump, you can crit. Like even if you're kind of just okay, you can get huge value from this. So I think it's pretty good. Pain Train, I think is situational. You take 10% more bullet damage at all times, which sucks. One of your big weaknesses on Soldier is like good heavies who can kill you in midair and have good positioning, like that often hold like high ground, because you want high ground. So if the heavies have access to high ground and they're good positionally, this will make you die faster, take more damage from sentries, which is one of the main things you're going to be dealing with, more damage from just like random pistol spam. You take more damage from snipers, which can be a big problem. soldier's head is pretty easy to make out. Like it's pretty easy to see. You have like a helmet that kind of like outlines your head perfectly, and I feel like as sniper, it's really easy to headshot soldiers even in the air. So, and also in scout 1v1s, you're just giving the scout an advantage. But if you need the capping rate, so C tier for situational, I think it can be good. And then for our final item, shovel is just bad. There's better options. The whip is better, market garden's better, escape plan's better. All of these do way more. The market garden is basically just a shovel that can crit in the air. The escape plan, the damage is okay on it, but the repositioning is huge. I've seen soldiers get out of jail so free so often. Like good soldiers that are like flank soldiers on gunboats easily get out of jail pretty often with this thing. So this allows them to escape and, you know, sustain and reset, heal, and then continue attacking. And then with the disciplinary action, the increased melee range, the fact that it can random crit, the speed boost is just crazy. Like this is leagues above this. This is just a basic melee weapon that doesn't really do anything. It's like super useful. So of all of the weapons, I think this is where they're at. Obviously, some of these can move up and down depending on player skill. And if you disagree or agree with any of these, definitely let me know. I'm curious to see what people think. This is for Valve Casual. You could argue disciplinary is just S tier, but I think the backup is the only S+. I think it just wins games. You don't even have to be good. You literally can just spam rockets through choke points, build it up, and then pop it and just let your team know. Or especially as you blow it, like get on mic and be like, move in, go, go, go. Like I'll walk up to my combo, like if there's a combo on my team, and be like, you're crit immune, go, go, go. Start yelling at them. And then I was like whipping a heavy and we were like stomping, like we were getting farmed on Powerhouse. And then I was like, all right, I'm done playing Huntsman, I'll switch to this. And then I started whipping the heavy med combo on our team and using this in between their Ubers, and we were just pushing through choke points and just destroying. And we almost had like a blowout game against a team that was stomping us previously. So it truly does just carry games. Like, what are they going to do when you're crit immune and tanky and overhealed? Like, you take, it's like if you're hitting each other equally, you just win the 1v1, or not the 1v1, the team fight. But that is it for this one. Definitely like, subscribe for more videos like this. Peace.